so many incredibly exciting things going on in our city. There is so much to celebrate. And that I suppose I will save those topics for my State of the City address. For that is not the speech to give today, as we welcome Dr. Drew. Welcome to you, sir. We look forward to hearing from you in just a few moments. For there are few things that can prevent us from becoming the next great American city and everything we want to be. There are a few things. And certainly at the top of that list would be if we fail to address housing and homelessness, this existential crisis, with greater urgency, collaboration, and action. We will not fail. We must not fail. We are not alone. This is in fact a California and a national problem. Small consolation, but truth is, it's much worse in other parts of California. In fact, I would argue that while some cities have crossed that proverbial tipping point, where it's hard to see how they can come back, although I believe they can, we have not yet hit that proverbial tipping point in Sacramento, as bad as it is. And if we do the right things, we can prevent us from going over and make this demonstrably better. While we collectively rightfully focus on how to end the suffering and impacts of unsheltered homelessness, an equally important commitment is to prevent people from ever becoming homeless in the first place. This is a unique time for housing, taking center stage as the budget and policy priority. In California, we negotiated with the business community a fair rent stabilization ordinance, and it's also the law in California that does not create any disincentive for new construction, but protects especially lower income tenants from becoming homeless. We have a housing trust fund, or will have a housing trust fund in our city, amounting to over $100 million of public and private resources when we are done. And we are committed to housing innovation to make sure that we have a range of housing prototypes that are faster to build and less expensive. And then there is the issue which we've come to talk about today around unsheltered homelessness. We have cured in this society, in this country, previously incurable diseases. Why can't we change homelessness? What is it going to take for people to feel different, to see the streets cleaner, and to know that the human misery is being addressed compassionately and effectively? You know, as mayor, I have gotten plenty of advice to not spend so much time on homelessness and housing. It's a political loser, people say. Focus on all the good stuff. Give the speech about MLS and the waterfront. I can't do it. I won't do it. There's too much suffering. There's too many committed organizations and people who are on the front lines trying to make this better. And we actually know what to do. And we have so many real opportunities not to cure this, but to make this situation much better. The issues are, of course, complicated, but sometimes we use complexity as an excuse to avoid simple truths. Let me tell you what I mean. I've been both a state legislative leader and now a mayor, and I know how the finger pointing goes both ways. This is a state responsibility, and you can't burden or mandate the localities to do what they can't do. And the state says, come on, this is a local problem. We can't run everything. In fact, at the local level, you know how to do it best. How about we just stop it and admit that it is a state responsibility, it is a local responsibility, and it is a community responsibility. Local control, which I respect, does not mean the state's abdication of leadership. The state must set clear expectations and the specific goals. The local governments must meet those expectations, but have every right to insist on the flexibility to do it their way. We have a unique opportunity to make tremendous progress with Governor Newsom, in my view. The first governor in my memory, and his administration is new, that has actually made homelessness and housing a top-tier state priority. My, how I wish that had been the case with other governors who I liked and worked with when I was in the legislature. It starts with admitting that we have not ever really articulated who is responsible for what at both the state and local level, and whether anyone is actually responsible and accountable for achieving real results. This might surprise you coming from me, knowing my political lineage, but it is far from just a lack of money that we suffer from around the issue of homelessness. It is a systems failure, and it is a public policy failure. Here is a simple truth. Name another area of major public concern where everything that government does is optional or voluntary. We don't say to our local communities, build the public schools and educate second and third graders if you choose to. It's a mandate. We don't say clean polluted water. It's a mandate. We don't say with other vulnerable populations like the developmentally disabled or foster kids, it's your choice whether or not you want to care for people. And the analogy that is most resonant to me is climate change and renewable energy. We did not say to the energy world and the energy producers, please volunteer to substitute out your fossil fuel and replace them with renewable energies. Please volunteer to do so. Do the best you can. Report to us at regular intervals, and we will comment on whether or not we think you are doing well enough. We didn't say that because climate change is a crisis. We mandated it. And that renewable energy mandate in California sent a market signal that has actually created urgent change when it comes to renewable energy. We are now aggressively meeting our standard like never before. Homelessness is a crisis of epic proportion, and yet everything we do is optional and voluntary. No, the state does not have an obligation to meet a result. The counties don't, and the cities don't. And the results speak for themselves. Governor Newsom asked me to chair his statewide task force on homelessness, or co-chair. And you know me well enough to know that I was not just going to bring forward a list of safe recommendations that have made 20 times over about how we just need more money, and if only we had more money, things would be better. Instead, I put on my old legal hat here and legislative hat, and we have proposed a legally enforceable mandate at all levels of government, not just local government, by the way, including the state, to be held accountable to aggressive but reasonable imperatives to bring a large percentage of unsheltered homeless people off the streets within an aggressive, again, but reasonable period of time. And if our jurisdictions, the state, the counties, and the cities do not meet that mandate, or at least show great progress towards meeting that mandate, we would empower the courts through a public right of action, not private litigation, to order the non-compliant jurisdiction to get the money out faster, to consolidate your resources with your neighboring jurisdictions so that you have more effect, to cite what must be cited against the inevitable NIMBYism that exists in ways that make it difficult to meet the mission. We intend to put this constitutional amendment with the help of the legislature and the governor on the ballot in 2020. For it is far past time that we require what we know is compassionate and necessary in California. If it matters enough, then it ought to be required, just like public education and renewable energy. When we do this, we will send a market signal that says no more fragmentation, no more alphabet soup of programs, no more counties do one thing, cities do one thing, the state does another. A real impetus and emphasis on a regional approach and regional cooperation. Should Sacramento embrace this mandate and hold itself accountable? We should and we must, not just as a city, but as a region. In our city, we have now spent 3 years raising tens of millions of dollars, and I'm proud of that with my colleagues. City money, state money, county money, and private money, amidst plenty of controversy, and we are poised to have 3 100-bed service-rich shelters in our city, efficiency housing, scattered site apartments, a total of 700 new and repurposed beds to move people off the streets. And by the way, I don't define shelter as just a bed anymore. As you'll hear from Dr. Drew, and you know I've spent my adult life trying to improve the mental health system in California. Every bed must be accompanied with the intensive services that allow people, more people than not, to reclaim their dignity and their lives. I'm optimistic because 700 beds with people staying an average of 4 to 6 months, because these are not long-term shelters, before moving on to varying degrees of independence would lead us, simple math, to being able to get thousands of people a year off the streets in the city alone. I'm so glad my colleague Phil Cerna is here. We are working better with the county than ever before. We're consolidating resources. We are actually taking that state money and working collaboratively to prevent homelessness and to rapidly rehouse people who find themselves in these tragic situations. This is quite an effort. Some might say it is a slog. Ultimately, I believe there are 3 North Stars for us in not just the city, but our entire region. Number 1, we must be committed to housing innovation. We cannot afford $400,000 to $500,000 in public subsidy per unit and expect that we're going to build the volume to house the people who are most vulnerable and fragile. We need to stoke a Silicon Valley moment around manufactured housing, efficiency housing, tiny housing, and in Sacramento we're going to lead the way because with our $100+ million trust fund, we will pass a policy, I hope in the next week and a half, that says 30% of that money must be spent on subsidy of no greater than $100,000, so that we send again that market signal, my favorite phrase today, that we are serious about efficiency housing. Secondly, we must address the mental health and the drug crisis, because Dr. Drew will say it, I'm not stealing his thunder, it's not just about housing. Sometimes mental health is separate from the drug problem. Sometimes it's chicken and egg. We especially have a serious methamphetamine problem. And my colleague Jeff Harris and I and Phil Cerna are all working on trying to address it. I say we build a 100-bed meth center in the greater Sacramento region that allows our law enforcement officers, our social workers, to get those who are addicted to meth into meth treatment in the Sacramento region and begin focusing on that issue as a top-tier priority. And finally, we have learned that building 100 beds at a time is not only less efficient than it could be, though necessary, but you have to have the same not in my backyard fight 5 or 6 times over. We all know the uncomfortable truth about this homeless problem. Everybody wants it solved, but nobody wants it solved near them. We are not afraid, and we have not been afraid to break through. And a lot of people have talked about the Haven for Hope in San Antonio. 23 acres, 1,000 people. are getting the help they need to end their homelessness. I believe, with the help of our healthcare systems, our hospital systems, who have been meeting and talking about this, that we do need to evolve to a haven for hope kind of approach in Sacramento. The question is, where do we site 23 acres? I'm open to ideas. The governor himself has said he is willing to put forward state surplus land. In fact, he's ordered it. And there are a lot of ideas out there. And I don't want to make too much news, stoke too much controversy today. But look, can we look at Mather, that's already doing a lot of the work already? Could we expand the Mather mission? Could Cal Expo has asked for $2.3 million of state funding for its 300-acre campus. Haven for Hope is 23 acres. Could we use Cal Expo in a way that would be remote from Arden Fair and the business sectors, in a way that would allow us to create some form of a campus on the southeast side of Cal Expo as a condition of them receiving state funding in order to continue the state fair? We have to be open to all these ideas. And I invite you to come forward with your ideas. Here's what I want to propose today. I say over the next 90 days, we commit as a city and a county, as a region, to have a public inventory of all public surplus lands, and then we meet together in whatever regional form of governance we can, and we identify the site or these sites for a Haven for Hope kind of a project in our community. In the end, there are two tests here for us to be held accountable to. Can we get thousands of people off the streets? I believe we can. And in fact, you look at the last 2 years, we are getting a lot of people off the streets. But the second test may be harder. Can we work in such a way, with such urgency and dispatch and collaboration, that the people actually feel the difference? That's our true test. And I believe that we can meet it. Nelson Mandela, the great Nelson Mandela, said, "It always seems impossible until it's done." What isn't possible, I ask, in this incredible place we call Sacramento? Let 2020 be the year we all said, it all seemed impossible until we got it done. Thank you very much.